Greetings, I'm the one called Horatio, and welcome to VG Therapy, the channel where I talk about games. Now let me reiterate something I said in my Symphony of the Night video. I am super excited to talk about Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, as I was someone who put a fair amount of money into the Kickstarter, and so I am wanting to see if what I put in was worth it. Especially as I'm someone who loves me some Castlevania. The classic series a bit more so, but still, I love Castlevania. And the idea that the next one is going to be made without Konami made me super excited. However, Mighty Number 9 came out since then, and that kind of lowered my expectations a bit. However, various backer demos and the Curse of the Moon spin-off game did actually bring my expectations back up. And so let's see if my expectations were misplaced.
The game was put up on Kickstarter on the 12th of May 2015, asking for 500 grand, and had reached the 1.5 million mark by the next day, with the campaign ending on the 13th of June with over $5.5 million, landing it in the top 20 most funded projects on Kickstarter, top 10 in the games category, and the second most funded video game. And the man leading everything, Koji Igarashi, who has worked on basically all of the good Castlevania games from Symphony of the Night onwards, initially thought that they might get 800k if they were lucky, but apparently people absolutely love Castlevania, so they were more than willing to contribute, especially since Igarashi was bringing a few friends along for the ride. Michiru Yamane, who has done music for a large number of Castlevania games along with working on Rocket Knight Adventures, Suikoden 3 and 4, and Skullgirls, and another composer working on the game is Ippo Yamada, who mainly worked on Mega Man Zero games along with a few other Capcom games. And unfortunately the only artwork we'll be getting from the amazing Ayami Kojima will be a cover slip for the game, and Yoshitaka Amano's gorgeous art will only be for a poster. But we will be hearing more from the talented voice of Solid Snake himself, David Hayter, throughout the game, as he was a stretch goal, and he will be joined by Robbie Belgrade, the original voice actor for Alucard back in Symphony of the Night.
So hopes had been built up high considering who they brought in and how much funding they got. Although that doesn't mean that there weren't issues.
Like for example, the Vita, Wii U, Mac and Linux versions got cancelled, to which refunds were offered, and this came with the announcement of the game being delayed. Twice. And then when giving out codes for the Curse of the Moon spin-off game, a number of people, myself included, got codes for the wrong region, which meant that we had to jump through some hoops to get it working or wait for them to get us the correct one.
Which was an annoyance, but it was easily fixable, so it wasn't a deal breaker. But it did make me unsure as to how the actual launch of the game would go. And the answer is not great. Because they had to delay the Switch version because they're having issues, and the version that got released was very, very poor. And it is still in a very sorry state as of recording. And then on top of that, the PC version that I was entitled to came out a day after the console versions for unknown reasons. And if you're in Japan, you still don't have the game. Your version is coming in September. Good God, guys, if you can't handle the release of your game, I hope that your game more than makes up for it.
And since after booting up the game and going through the options, I get to the file select screen and found an old save, and trying to save over it made the game crash.
Not a very strong opening now, is it?
Which console users will have to see again if they started playing before a certain patch came out, because for some reason a number of chests in the game would be opened if you started on version 1.01, then updated to 1.02, including those with items you needed to progress, which means that your game would be soft-locked and you would need to start a new save. So me playing on PC and it coming out late was actually a blessing.
But for a large number of people, these issues aren't even going to be a thing, but I feel that they do warrant mentioning because, like me funding the game on Kickstarter, they do colour my expectations and how I feel about the game as a whole. But enough about that, and let's see what this game is actually like.
And it's like Castlevania but legally distinct. It has many of the same enemy weapon archetypes and abilities, and coming straight off Symphony of the Night made me recognize so many more things than I probably would have if I was just remembering it from a few years back, like the waterfall. And for those who either haven't played Symphony of the Night or haven't watched my video on it, then know that this is a good thing.
But it's not a straight rip-off of Symphony of the Night, it does its own thing. And while I am not as familiar with later Castlevania games as I am with earlier ones, so there might be some things that I mention that actually do come from there.
Like while the castle you explore is a large labyrinth full of cool monsters and fun platforming, there is also an outside area that has a few NPCs. While NPCs, shops and side quests are not new, I'm unsure of earlier games having an alchemy system which allows you to not only craft items, gear and weapons, but also craft and upgrade shards. Shards are these giant crystals that enemies drop, and depending on what color they are, changes what they do. Red is an attack or immediate activation, purple is a ranged attack, yellow is a passive buff, blue is a unique ability, green are familiars, and white are permanent upgrades. Some are more useful than others, but that's a given when every every single enemy has one, which means that either you find your favorite ones early on and never change, or you're changing all the time. For me, I mainly stuck with some of the early shards because they managed to stay useful throughout the game. The thing I kept changing though was how I looked, because various accessories actually show up, and so you can customize how you look and play Fashionvania, which is assisted by the existence of a man named Todd. They can change your hairstyle, hair color, the color scheme of your clothes, your eye color, and your skin color, which can result in you looking completely different, which carries over into the cutscenes, which is to be expected. But the thing I personally didn't expect was that if you're using an ability that turns you into an enemy or changes how you look in any way, then that will also be reflected, which could potentially lead to some pretty funny results. And speaking of funny results, there is a side quest involving a man who got lost in the castle and you have to help him leave, but because he's an idiot, he keeps getting lost further in the castle. And it's a fun side quest because the writing's on point and many of the side interactions are a lot of fun, and they are even more endearing because of all the American voice actors trying to do British accents. Except for Zangetsu, as he's voiced by David Hayter, so people want his voice, and the same goes for the character voiced by Robbie Belgrade, Orlok Dracul, who is not Alucard. No, he couldn't possibly be Alucard because he is Orlok Dracul, and he led you books that act as buffs.
And I should probably use this opportunity to talk about the characters as a whole.
First up we have Miriam. She is a shardbinder, which is a type of person who has been fused with magical crystals called shards. After being fused with various shards by alchemists, she got frozen in time for 10 years, only to wake up and find that Jebel, her friend who went through the same process, has suddenly become evil, and so it's up to her and Johannes, who is a good alchemist, to try and stop it. Along the way, they are helped by Dominique, who is a nun from the church, and Zangetsu, a man who hates shardbinders as much as he hates demons. There's also Alfred, who seems to be trying to achieve something else entirely. As the game progresses, you learn more about the characters, and they help you out in various ways by giving you hints, items, or in Zangetsu's case, helping you during a level and against a boss. But the important part is the hints, because it tells you where you should be looking to progress, because later on that can be a bit difficult. Although they don't give you hints as to how to get two very important items. The shard that lets you go underwater, and the shard that lets you get through spikes. I lucked out and got the water shard pretty easily, so that was no big issue, but people who aren't so lucky are going to have no idea as how to progress, which is what I ran into a bit later. Because when I played this was early on, so there weren't any guides or anything that could tell me how to get through this spike hallway, and not being able to see anywhere on my map that I missed and no one telling me that I needed a shard, I found an alternate path through the spikes, which I kinda knew was wrong, but since there were a few situations where well-placed jump kicks were required to get a chest, I felt that this was still a valid way through. And I still don't have that shard, but I can just teleport around, so that's no issue, which funnily enough is the same way I dealt with another wall I couldn't get past.
And that's what I feel this game is. It's more of what you love by people who know what you love.
I'm not sure if there were any parts in the early Castlevania games that were intentionally set up in a way to allow you to get items and secrets before you had the power up that you needed to do it properly, but there are a lot of things in this game that feel intentionally put in because they know what people like the aforementioned skips, but there's also like a host of JoJo references, which existed before but I don't think to the extent they do here. The 8-bit nightmare is just a level from classic Castlevania for those who didn't get their fix from Curse of the Moon, even more references to Castlevania, and there's probably a bunch more that I missed or can't think of.
Like, the main complaint that I can see people talking about is that it only takes from Castlevania itself and not so much from other Metroidvanias that came out since the last Castlevania in 2009.
And I do agree. At times I thought to myself that what I'm playing feels like the PS2 sequel to Symphony. That if the game came out in 2005, the only difference would be graphical fidelity. And as someone who loves his PS2, this is not necessarily a bad thing, but it does feel like this is what Lament of Innocence or Curse of Darkness would have been if Konami tried to push the 2D games more. And because of this, the entire time I was wondering what this game's inverted castle would be, as people seem to like that, so with the mindset of this being a new Castlevania, I was expecting them to put something like that in at the request of the publisher. And when I got to Tiny Huge Island, I groaned because I thought that I would have to play the entire game again, but everything is just annoyingly bigger. But when I looked at the map and thought that this was its own thing, I actually fell in love with it.
I honestly really liked the game, and I'm going to keep playing it on my Switch when I'm out. Because even though I've beaten it and put a ton of time into it for this review, there's still things I haven't seen, like 0.2% of the castle, a bunch of enemies and shards, including the Spike Breaker shard. And at this point in time, I'm mainly waiting on two things. The first being guide so I can see where all the stuff I missed is, and also Switch updates and patches because that game is not very good at this point in time. But that's just a short-term thing. In the long term, there's also going to be a ton of free DLCs coming to the game. But since those are not out yet, I can only give a review as to the current PC build which I played for this review. And my score is a 4 out of 4. It's not perfect by any means, but I really did enjoy it and I highly recommend it, which is what my reviews are. Do I recommend it or not? And I do highly recommend this. Because it's also getting free DLCs, as I said, so it's only going to get better. And with that, I've been Horror Show, and this was VG Therapy.